This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Hello and welcome to Heritage Matters, a programme brought to you by the Southern Heritage Trust. I'm Dougal Stevenson. In this week's programme, Gregor Campbell has a scoop on the story behind a plane crash. Bill Southworth has been looking at Dunedin's first mental hospitals, and we explore a famous early shopping arcade. What was reported at the time as the crash of a light plane at Taieri Airport turns out to have been a fatal pile-up of an Air Force bomber heading out on a bombing mission. This exclusive report from Gregor Campbell.
In 1940, 3 aeroplanes took off from the Air Force base on the North Taieri Plain near Dunedin. One of them crashed with fatal consequences, as reported by the Evening Post. Pilot killed, 2 others injured. By Telegraph, Press Association, Dunedin, this day. An airspeed Oxford bomber visiting Dunedin from Christchurch crashed at Taieri Aerodrome at 7:25 this morning and burst into flames. Squadron leader John Hugh Kitson, who was in charge of the machine, died shortly afterwards from injuries. Aircraftman Ronald Edward Kilpatrick, single of Oamaru, was seriously hurt, and pilot officer Peter Robert McNabb, married of Auckland, was slightly injured. Squadron leader Kitson was promoted only yesterday from the rank of flight lieutenant. He joined the RAF in 1934 and arrived in New Zealand on loan to the RNZAF in March of this year. He was employed on flying instructional duties at Wigram. He was married, his wife and 2 children being in England. An inquest on Squadron leader Kitson was opened today. A court of inquiry will be held tomorrow. The airspeed Oxford was not really a bomber, and it was not, as reported by other newspapers, on a training flight. A German commerce raider, the Orion, disguised as a freighter, was in New Zealand waters. A mine laid by the Orion had sunk the RMS Niagara a few days before, and it was reported that mines had been laid outside Otago Harbour. A flight of 3 Oxfords flew from Christchurch to Dunedin and were fuelled and bombed up to search for and attack the German raider. The Oxford could normally carry 184 pounds of practice bombs. On this occasion, each was fitted with a 250-pound bomb. Squadron leader Kitson took off and was seen to turn to avoid some trees. His plane stalled and crashed, catching fire. 2 injured crew were rescued by the fire crew. Realising there was still a man inside, one of the fire crew went for him, with foam being sprayed on the door he entered. Kitson was removed, but it was too late for him. Leading aircraftman Desmond Trevelyan-Herrick was awarded the George Medal for his courage in climbing into a burning plane with a live bomb to attempt his rescue. He died in 1941 as a prisoner of war in France. The mission on which John Kitson died was possibly, if not probably, the only combat mission ever flown out of the Taieri Air Force Base. And I am the truly humbled Gregor Campbell for Heritage Matters.
In early Dunedin, those deemed mentally ill were initially locked up in the local jail. As the population grew, so did the numbers needing care. What they called insane asylums were built, and these turned out to have some rather peculiar ideas about how to cure patients. This report from Bill Southworth.
Treatment of the mentally ill had had a bad reputation in the old country. Not long before Otago was settled, there'd been the practice of chaining up patients in cells, leaving them there abandoned and filthy. Mental psychosis was even still badly understood by the time the first immigrant ships arrived in Dunedin. The few mental patients were locked up in the local jail, sharing their cells with alcoholics and criminals. Because people addicted to alcohol were treated as insane, the jails eventually became overcrowded and larger accommodation had to be found. The overcrowding was made worse when the gold rush swelled population and it was no longer a small township. The increasing population meant something different was needed. That came in the form of the Dunedin Lunatic Asylum, built in 1863 on the site where Otago Boys High School is today. It was only meant to be a temporary solution. In the first few months, because of lack of staff, police had to help watch the patients at night. The building was small and only had 24 patients when it opened. The need for something bigger was obvious, and a commission of the Otago Provincial Council noted the following year that
the Commission considers that lunatics should be regarded by the state as objects of tender solicitude, and that no pain or expense should be spared in ameliorating their condition. We wholly condemn their being treated as paupers or prisoners.
as the city continued to grow, so did the number of patients. Extensions were added, and by the 1870s, the asylum, designed for 21 patients, now had 228. The 6 causes for admission were alcoholism, mania, melancholia, delusions, dementia, and idiocy. The director suggested that nearly half the patients owed their condition directly or indirectly to alcohol, although only 42 were described as out-and-out alcoholics. Many of these had DTs and came there to dry out. Between 1863 and 1876, 910 patients spent time in the asylum. Almost 200 of these came from the Otago goldfields, and 24 of this group were Chinese, who also faced strong racist bias from some in authority, because one inspector's report noted,
"There are 7 Chinese lunatic patients in the asylum, and considering the racial antipathy of the European to the leprous Mongolian, I am of the opinion that it is injurious to the European lunatic being brought into daily contact with the Chinese, and that an additional ward and airing court should be provided for the latter without delay."
There seemed to be a large number of insane people compared with Great Britain. The medical officer of Otago put this down to what he called the practice of shipping lunatics to the province from Britain, and especially from Scotland. There were cases of people with a history of asylum care being shipped out under false pretences by their relations. In 1874, the director claimed that a third of the women admitted that year had just come from the ships or the immigrant barracks. The Dunedin Asylum claimed a high cure rate of 62%. This is surprising because the use of drugs was fairly limited. Patients were given a glass of alcohol each day, such as brandy or gin. Colcineth pills used these days as a homeopathic remedy for bloating, and which can also be used as a laxative. The main emphasis at the new asylum was on comfortable accommodation, good regular food, exercise and outdoor employment. However, the smallness of the asylum continued to cause problems. The Inspector of Asylums wrote in 1877,
"The building is badly constructed, and some parts of it are very gloomy and prison-like. The great mass of the male patients are entirely restricted for exercise, where they present a dismal spectacle. Many of them are violent and dangerous, and the fear of fights and serious accidents caused mechanical restraint and seclusion to be used to an extent which is distressing to witness."
Eventually, the overcrowding became too great and the government decided to build a larger asylum in the countryside at Seacliff, 25 kilometres north of Dunedin. Robert Lawson, the famous Dunedin architect, was chosen to design it. He had already designed First Church, Knox Church, Otago Boys High School, and many other prominent buildings. Lawson decided to build Seacliff Lunatic Asylum in the Scottish baronial style. Designed to house 500 patients and 50 staff, the building was, upon its completion, New Zealand's largest building for the next 50 years. The gabled roof line was dominated by a mammoth tower complete with turrets and a spire. The edifice's broadly E-shaped ground plan was 230 metres long by 69 metres wide. The Great Tower, which was very similar to the one that's still at Otago University, was actually designed so that inmates could be observed should they attempt to escape, and it was almost 50 metres tall. It was later said of the design that, quote, The Victorians might not have wanted their lunatics living with them, but they liked to house them grandly. The land under the building proved to be unstable, and subsidence caused some of the buildings to slump, causing cracks and making some areas uninhabitable. It broke the water and sewage pipes, and they had to be replaced. This destroyed Lawson's reputation, particularly after his first church commission also developed leaks because of faulty construction. He almost went bankrupt through lack of commissions and left Dunedin. For 30 years, the medical superintendent of the Seacliff Asylum was Dr. Truby King, the founder of the Plunkett Society. He believed people had a fundamental right to fresh air and sunshine, wholesome food, regular exercise and cleanliness. Seacliff was also a farm asylum and was set in 900 acres of farmland. King saw farming as being therapeutic for patients. Recreational pursuits were encouraged. On Saturdays there were afternoon sports, tennis and croquet for women, with dancers and visiting entertainers. The use of restraints and seclusion was strictly controlled. It was a dramatic change from the way patients had been treated in the early years of European settlement. Truby King rejected the use of drugs and psychotherapy. He believed any benefits achieved by these methods could be better provided by giving male patients work in the gardens or on the farm. Women were occupied with sewing and knitting and helping out in the laundry and kitchen. He believed nothing aggravated mental problems more than idleness. Work kept both the mind and body healthy, alleviated boredom, improved appearance, and helped the patients to sleep. Truby King's methods attracted some criticisms. A letter from the writer to the Globe newspaper complained,
"An asylum was maintained expressly to keep insane people from being dangerous to the community at large. If lunatics are allowed to wander from the asylum, that asylum is failing for the purpose for which it was intended."
The cure rate at Seacliff was between 35 and 45%, slightly but not much lower than the New Zealand average. It seemed that environmental cures, though, could not fix the deep-seated psychiatric problems. Dr. Truby King also had some ideas about the causes of mental illness that seem rather unusual today. He believed inadequate diet and bad child-rearing caused insanity. He seemed to be obsessed with diet, being the root of many problems. The amount of vegetables in the patients' diets was boosted, and the amount of meat they were given was reduced. He believed that
"An undue proportion of meat is not good for the insane. The consumption of flesh by the insane should be limited, because it is desirable to lessen rather than foster the animal propensities. Early indigestion is a prime factor in the vices of puberty and adolescence, besides rendering the individual an easy prey to vice and insanity throughout life."
Truby King's stewardship ended in 1907. Later treatment at Seacliff became much more reliant on the recently invented drugs, and this increased the cure rate. The incarceration of people in mental hospitals fell out of favour and was largely replaced by care in the community. The Seacliff building continued to slump and to deteriorate. The tower was demolished in 1945 and the remaining structure was demolished in 1957. For much of this material, I am indebted to the graduate history students who contributed to the book Unfortunate Folk, Essays on Mental Health Treatments 1863 to 1992, which was edited by Professor Barbara Brooks and Jane Thompson. This is Bill Southworth reporting for Heritage Matters.
In the 19th century, Dunedin developed its own brand of entrepreneurs. One of these was Henry Farley, who developed a shopping arcade where you could buy just about anything. This report from Gregor Campbell.
Henry Farley was a man with a sharp eye for business. He turned a peninsula farm into the notorious Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. He had brick buildings built in a town of flammable wood. And he built a street of shops on a paddock between High and McLagan Streets only months after the beginning of Otago's gold rush. It was Farley's Arcade, and it was the centre of commercial life. In August 1862, 1 year and 3 months after Gabriel Reed's discovery of gold at Tuapeka, the Otago Daily Times published this description of the arcade. Farley's Arcade, Saturday night, from the Daily Times special reporter. Farley's Arcade is like no other in the known wide, wide world. It is not like the Burlington Arcade in Piccadilly, nor the Lowther in the Strand, nor the one in Soho, nor that in Oxford Street, but is a combination, or a concentration, or let me say, a compound amalgamation of the whole, with a great deal that is original and unique added. It can be compared to nothing, and nothing can be compared to it. Farley's Arcade is, par excellence, the arcade of all arcades. It is, sui generis, a thing of itself, the creation of a bold speculator and deep financier, a universal emporium, a public mart, a commercial multum imparvo, and a depot for the reception of every description of merchandise, edibles, drinkables, wearables, and, if the word be good English, smokables. It is an inlet and an outlet, a rendezvous, a trysting place. There is no word or number of words in the English language which could convey to a stranger what Farley's Arcade is or is not like. Let me try and show what can be accomplished at this place. I will take a digger, a lucky one of course, just returned, let me say from Tuapeka. He requires a complete fit-out of everything, rehabiting, renovating, and in all respects wanting to be thoroughly repaired and done up in a thorough and gentlemanlike manner. He enters, I will premise, from Mant Street, and having turned into the cafe on the left, he will refresh the inward man with the daintiest of dishes he may please to call for, washed down, sub rosa by the way, with pale sherry or bitter beer of the best brand. Having sallied out, he will purchase his cigar or aromatic at the divan near at hand, and walking over to the other side, a door or two further on, he can fit himself with a good pair of understandings which will carry him on to the next shop, where he will be quickly and economically furnished with coat, trousers and vest, while a deerstalker, bought at the adjoining emporium, will put the finishing stroke to his outward man. The next operation he will probably undergo will be to get his hair cut and his beard and moustache trimmed. There are several of such establishments at which he can make his choice and pay his money. I have taken for my hero a lucky digger. Let it be understood he is also a liberal and generous one. He must have a watch. He can buy 50 if he likes, within 2 steps from where he stands, and a brooch or ring of pure colonial gold for his sweetheart. Or, for this affectionate and tender purpose, he may prefer a workbox, or a Moroccan reticule, or it may be a silk dress. He has only to ask, and to have, and to pay. There are a dozen establishments, all in a position to do business in any of these lines, for here are bazaars and emporiums and repositories where can be purchased the largest of crinolines down to the smallest of anything in feminine wear. Our digger may be a married man with a desire to furnish. He need not go 6 doors before he can be supplied with every requisite, from a baby's cot or a 4-poster to a pier glass in gilt or maloo. Does he require domestic supplies? He has but to move a few more paces, and there at the China Mart and the Canton Warehouse he can lay in his tea, sugar and groceries. At the adjoining establishments he may order himself a leg of loin or delicate dairy-fed pork, or any other article in the delicate dairy-fed pork small goods line, which is inclusive of sausages and pork pies, and which the inhabitants of Dunedin appear distractingly fond of. In vegetables he can buy anything from a pineapple to a pippin, or from a sack of potatoes to a tomato or stick of celery. Is he for the news of the day? Here, close at hand, he can obtain the latest copy of the Age, Argus or Daily Times. Does he want his tooth drawn? Which it is to be hoped he does not. The operator is standing at his surgery door, ready to render his professional assistance at the shortest possible amount of notice. In fine, there is nothing he or anyone else requires but what he or they can be supplied with. I will not go quite so far as to assert that in Farley's Arcade everything can be had from a needle to an anchor, as I rather doubt whether the latter nautical article could be procured. But everything which men of extensive ideas and comprehensive minds permit themselves to include, in a general way, between these two articles, I have no hesitation in saying could be produced on the very shortest notice at one or other of the 56 establishments which range themselves along the two sides of the planked walk. But I've been speaking of the arcade as it may be on ordinary occasions. I desire to portray it as it appears on a Saturday night. I doubt whether I am equal to the task, but shall nevertheless try. And I am the keeping up of appearances Gregor Campbell for Heritage Matters.
The Heritage New Zealand Poheri-tonga list has been developed since the 1970s under succession of legislative requirements. Some of the buildings we have in Dunedin City have been on our list since that time. Part of my role as Heritage Assessment Advisor is to update information we have on the list, as well as researching and writing about new listings. The elegant security buildings on the corner of Moray Place and Stuart Street is one of the early buildings listed in Dunedin. It was first listed in 1982. I have recently upgraded the listing, and the information will be available on our website shortly. The security buildings were built on the corner of Moray Place and Stuart Street during World War I by Fletcher Brothers Limited. The land at this corner was slow to develop, remaining as land with a neighbouring workshop until 1914. Fletcher Brothers Limited was formed by James Fletcher and his brother William. After first working as a foreman for a building firm, James set up a house building partnership with Burt Morris in 1909. With brother William, James moved on to construction work, taking on large projects. The Fletcher Brothers Limited were listed as the builders of the security building, but they also owned the property under the name the Dunedin Building Company on the certificate of title. Within 3 years, Fletcher Brothers took on bigger local projects, such as the Town Hall, municipal baths, and a 3-storey office block. Building work in Dunedin continued through World War I, despite the wide-ranging issues with labour and materials, which were more difficult and expensive to source, but the government did not impose any restrictions. By 1919, the company was known as Fletcher Construction and was established in Dunedin, Auckland and Wellington. The security building was constructed from brick and Oamaru stone and was designed by McPhee and Hood. Beautiful details are featured on the exterior, including garlands on the 5th floor level and leaf patterns around the arch windows on the 1st floor corners. The ground floor entrance is particularly distinctive with its marble door frame and matching frames around the shop windows. This inner doorway to the building was once the main door from the street, with a grille in front to keep trespassers off the porch at night. As the building was designed as an office, the rooms were fairly plain, with little built ornament, and have been modernised with lower ceilings and up-to-date partitioning. The building was the neighbour of the Dunedin Municipal Baths, which opened in 1914 and were also built by the Fletcher brothers. The pitted windowsill on the Moray Place end of the building dates from the days when young people waited to queue for the swimming baths and filled in their time digging coins into the Oamaru stone, which is protected by perspex today. There is a wonderful poem on the perspex by Peter Olds, which I encourage people to stop and read. The baths were closed on the 6th of June 1964 and the new pool, Moana Pool, was opened. The old baths were fully demolished and cleared by 1967. The wall, which was originally obscured by the next door, Dunedin Municipal Baths, has since been concreted. The security building was the site of 2 major incidents during the mid-20th century. In 1952, the building witnessed from close quarters one of Dunedin's biggest fires which ignited across the road. The blaze of the Hayman & Co Limited buildings was alerted by the members of the public. Firemen on arrival were hampered by low water pressure in a time of water shortage. The newspapers reported, the Hayman's premises were obviously doomed soon after 4 a.m. The collapse of the roof sent great gobbets of flame hurling skyward to rain on surrounding buildings and start a series of new fires. The delay in the alarm being raised, and as the buildings were such a fire risk, there was no way to save them. The fire services abandoned hope of saving them and concentrated instead on the surrounding premises. The fact the fire occurred during a time of water restrictions also hampered the fight against the flames, as it was a good 20 minutes until the water valves were opened and then the pressure was weak. An inquiry into the fire concluded that if an automatic fire alarm had been installed, it could have been controlled. The security building suffered some scorching and a few minor fires in the roof from sparks which were caused by the Hayman's roof spectacularly collapsing. The incredible heat from the Hayman's building also set alight the window sashes. Other nearby buildings were damaged extensively, but the security building remained relatively intact. However, a decade later, it was not so lucky. In 1962, the building was subjected to a horrific bomb explosion. On the morning of 5th of February 1962, Dunedin solicitor James Ward was delivered a parcel bomb. The explosion which followed was heard blocks away, and Mr. Ward was found lying amongst the debris severely injured. He later died that day in hospital from his extensive injuries. His death at the will of an unknown parcel bomber shocked New Zealand, both for the unusual method of killing and the apparent lack of motive. The mystery of who sent the bomb was never solved, and the case is still open today. The security building has historic and architectural significance and is list number 2216 on the Rarangi Kōrero Heritage New Zealand list. This story has been brought to you by Alison Breese for Heritage Matters.
This program has been generously sponsored by the Southern Heritage Trust. The Trust works to protect the city's heritage, particularly its fine old buildings and all the things that make Dunedin New Zealand's heritage capital. The Trust welcomes new members. It can be contacted at southernheritage.org.nz. That's southernheritage, all one word, .org.nz.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.